Radhey Radhey. I ended my last talk on the note of the importance of offering the mind and the intellect in the process of devotion. One may ask, why is it that we must surrender or offer the mind when we can reap the benefits of devotion by engaging our senses? Well, the first reason is that the senses are at the mercy of the mind. So in other words, it is the mind that directs the senses in the first place. This means that the mind is the governor. The mind governs what the senses do. Without the association of the mind, the senses cannot perform their respective functions. For example, if your mind is preoccupied with something, you may be reading or you may be watching TV or whatever, if there's any sound or any noise in the house, if your mind is engaged in any kind of activity, what will happen? You will not hear the sound. If your mind is preoccupied with something else, then the senses do not perform. They do not function because the mind is engaged in something else. So that is one reason. The other reason is that the mind is the faculty of thoughts. So the mind is a machinery that has been given to us by God, and the function of the mind is to keep generating thoughts. So the mind is the governor, the mind is the performer of every action. Now, the physical action that we perform is not what binds us to the world. It is, in fact, the motivation behind the actions that we perform that bind us to the world. Now, the motivation could be bad, it could be good, or it could be of a spiritual nature. And accordingly, we reap the consequences of those actions. So the mind is the doer. That is why our scriptures tell us, Man eva manushyanam karanam bandhamokshayoho, that the mind alone is the cause of our bondage. In other words, when we constantly associate and attach our mind in the world, it becomes the cause of our bondage. On the contrary, if our mind is engaged in spiritual things and in spiritual practice, then that same mind becomes the cause of our liberation, of our exit from this world. So, just as a way of explaining the importance of surrendering the mind, I'd like to share some thoughts, because many people in the world who have not received or who have not been fortunate enough to receive the guidance of a God-realized personality do not know this secret of offering or surrendering the mind. And that is why it is seen the world over that in all temples and places of worship, people are observed engaging their physical body or their senses only, leaving their mind free. So there are a large number of people that are completely ignorant of this fact that the mind has to be surrendered. For example, you will find large numbers of people taking a holy dip in the sacred river Ganges every day. Hindus believe that Mother Ganga is a form of God possessing sanctifying virtues. And so by bathing in her waters, we can absolve ourselves from all of our sins. In other words, by submerging ourselves in her waters, all our sins are washed away. Our scriptures also support this truth. During special occasions such as the Kumbh Mela, Purnima, Chaturmas, and so on, hundreds of thousands of people throng the ghats, or the banks of the sacred Ganga, solely for this purpose. So a question that naturally arises is that if this were true, why are people not absolved of sins yet? We see and we hear when we watch TV, like there's so much terrorism, sins, crime, so much going on in this world. So people wonder like that if by taking a dip in river Ganga can redeem the sins, then why do we see, why do we witness, and why do we hear, why do we observe so much unrest in this world? If it were simply the case of bathing in the Ganges, then everyone could be automatically freed from the consequences of committing sins. So what is the reason behind this? What is the underlying reason that even though in the face of such divine truth that we have at our disposal directly from our divine scriptures, why do we see so much unrest in this world? What is the reason that even though people, they take dips in river Ganga, and yet, on the contrary, sins keep on multiplying instead of people becoming purified? What is the reason? So the reason for this will be explained in my next talk. Shrimat Sadguru Sarkar Ki Jai, Shrimat Yugal Sarkar Ki Jai, Jai Jai Shri Radhe, Jai Jai Shri Radhe, Jai Jai Shri Radhe.